recorded. All right. Melissa, how are we doing? Do we think we're ready to get things rolling here?
We are just about ready. Let me open up the very recently downloaded slide deck and then I will share that.
Awesome. And I'm gonna admit Jim.
Thank
There's a
you. I can get my downloads to work.
right. So we're getting the screen set up. Again, thank you to everybody who has joined us today. As soon as we get our screen ready to go, we will begin today's work group meeting. It's really small for some reason. Sally, are you seeing the normal size share screen, or is it small to you?
It's like it's maybe I'm sharing the wrong one. Just a moment here.
Sorry.
Let's see. That's good.
Oh,
Screen.
I think you have to go into full screen. I think it's just the PDF. Sorry.
Right.
There we go.
There we go. Interview screen.
Ah,
Yes.
now the
I
normal
think
look
so.
of a slide presentation on Zoom. So, all right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today, and thank you, Melissa, for getting this set up. My name is Paul Sell, Associate Director here at Youth Development Oregon, and I'll be helping facilitate this request for applications or RFA work group for October 11th, 2024. And as people have been signing on, just a note that if you are a YDD staff or you are a YDC member, if you could please put YDO in front of your name, that'll help us during the facilitation of this meeting. And then also, if you are a guest or a stakeholder, GS indicates that. And again, we just want to make sure that we give priority to our council members during discussions that will happen throughout the day. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Sally.
Excellent. Let's go to the next slide. I'm Sally Deck, and I'm a grant manager. I want to run through the agenda, and then we'll keep rolling here. What we will talk about today is, first we'll do some introductions, then we'll do a review of the structure and the agreements of this work group, a recap of what we did in the last meeting. So the last time we met was September 27th, so we'll recap that meeting. And then today we'll be talking about the reporting methodology for the youth grants, and then also individual level participant data. We'll have time for a discussion and dialogue, and intend to wrap up by 1:30 at the latest. So again, there's a note there at the bottom that if you are a grantee, a member of the public, a hopeful grantee in the future, then we ask that you label your name as guest stakeholder, so a little GS before your name. And if you are new to changing your name in Zoom, you'll just right click on your name, and then it'll give you the option to choose rename, and that's how you'll be able to make that update. All right, let's go ahead to the next slide. So so we're gonna introduce the staff first, and then we'll go around and have everybody else introduce themselves as well. And so you can just do a really quick introduction, your name, organization, your role, if you are a grantee, what your familiarity is with the grants and RFA process. And then in the chat, go ahead and put the rest of the details that feel pertinent to you, your organization, your job title, other details like that. So I'm going to pass it first to our director, Brian Detman, and then we'll go through the rest of the staff. Brian, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you, Sally. Thanks everybody for being here. Great to see a range of staff, and I see some council members also on the call or on the Zoom. So just many thanks for everybody being here. Real quick, Brian Detman, Youth Development Oregon Director, quite familiar with our grants as the humble leader of all this, the great work that's happening. So thanks so much. Thanks, Al.
All right, I'm going to pass it to Cord, and then Cord, you can pass it to whoever on the staff you feel you see their camera is on.
Perfect. I'll do that. Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Cord Bucher. I'm the Deputy Director, Youth Development, Oregon Youth Development Division. And I will pass it over to Bill Hansel.
Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Friday. I'm Bill Hansel, Grant Manager and Data Lead for YDO. And with that, I'll pass it to Abraham.
Hello, I'm Abraham Magana, Grant Manager and Operations Analyst with YDO. I'll pass it to Jared.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jared Shaw. I'm a grant manager and workforce analyst at YDO. And I'll pass it to Tanisha.
Thanks, Jared. My name is Tanisha Bishop, Youth Grant Administrative Specialist, tongue-tied with YDO. I'll pass it to Molly Burns.
Hello, everyone. My name is Molly Burns. Sorry, I'm on my phone. I am a grant manager, re-engagement analyst with Youth Development Oregon, and I'll pass it to Melissa.
Thank you, Molly. Melissa Gallardo, Executive Support Specialist for YDO. I'm going to pass it back to Sally just to make sure we have everyone.
Excellent. Do we have any staff that we missed? Everybody gets rearranged when we go on and off camera. I'd like to pass it to Zan, and then if there are any other council members, we'll have you introduce yourselves.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Zan Ojiro. I am a Youth Development Council member and Benton County Commissioner.
Thanks, Zan. I'm just going to go in the order of what I see on my screen here. Talitha?
Can I go like two people down? I'm in the elevator.
Oh, absolutely. I'll call on you in a moment.
Thank you.
Yeah. Jim Bowen?
Hi, I'm Jim Bowen. I work for High Desert ESD in Central Oregon, and I'm the Regional Director of Mental and Behavior Health. And I know little about your grants, but I'm excited to learn more.
Excellent. We're glad you're here. Tanya Cinco.
Hi, everybody. I'm Curriculum Director at the Cook Hill School District, and I am partnering with Winter Lakes High School, who had this grant a few years ago and is interested in pursuing receiving the grant again. And happy to be here and always learn more.
Excellent. Glad you're here. Claudia.
Hi, everybody. My name is Claudia Cedeno. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the core program manager with Impact Northwest. We currently hold the Future Ready Oregon grant and the Youth Community Investment grant as well. But this is going to be my first time going through the RFP project timeline, so I'm really excited about it.
Glad you're here. There's a phone number, starts with area code 541. If you're able to unmute and introduce yourself. Maybe. Oh.
Hello,
If not,
can you all hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
I hear you.
So I don't know for sure if this is the I have a 541 number, but I don't know if that's the one you're calling out. So this is Robin Johnson, council member.
Hey, Robin, glad you're here.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah. All right. And then Talitha, if this is a good time for you.
yes. Can you guys see me? Hello?
Yes, we can see you.
Oh, okay. I can't see myself or anyone else. That's okay. My name is Talitha Mathis. I'm the Assistant Director at Better Chances, and I am on the meeting to learn more about grant opportunities to hopefully apply for one of the upcoming grants to
Excellent.
support the youth that we work with in the community.
Excellent. We are glad to have you.
Thank you.
Anyone else who joined? Melissa or Paul, do you see anyone else?
No, I think we are good, Sally. Thank you.
All right, let's go. Let's bump to the next slide. So the structure of this work group is that we have created this to have a recurring touch point for the Youth Development Council as well as the stakeholders of all of our grants. So that includes community members, the public, and our grantees, so that we all can chat more, learn about, and discuss What we're looking at for the 2025-27 youth grants RFA components. This is a non-binding dialogue, and our intention is that we will keep the RFA development processes moving forward within our timeline, but also that we will be increasing transparency around our funding, the scope of our grants, as well as the development of our RFAs, and that this is an opportunity for us to get feedback and to be in conversation with folks about the RFA process. Are there any questions on that? All right, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. And if folks have questions at other time, don't hesitate to raise your hand or pop a question in the chat, and we will make sure that we get to it. The agreements that we have for this work group is that we agree to keep the discussion and our sharing to the current agenda topic item. So that's why we do a review of the prior agenda items, and then that gives us some concentrated time to talk about what is on our agenda today. We use the 25-27 continuous improvement areas for our RFA, as well as our YDO equity lens to guide our discussions. We give priority to members of the Youth Development Council, as well as folks who we have specifically invited to these conversations, knowing that everyone is welcome here. We are glad to have all members of the public, and that we utilize the chat and reaction functions so that we can share ideas. We can request time to share our thoughts or ask questions. And if you like to use reactions to emphasize points during discussion, we welcome that as well. We ask that folks remain muted until called upon, and that if you're able to, we really prefer that folks turn their camera on while speaking, just so we can see folks. And we ask that everyone stay committed to the allotted time for our share out, our facilitator direction, and the timeline of our meeting. Any questions on that? And it looks like we have another person joining. I'm going to let them connect to audio and then have them do an introduction as well.
And Sally, just to note that Robin is on the phone. So Robin, just so you know, we will hit pause and ask for questions. Feel free to unmute yourself, because chat is probably not the easiest thing to do, dialing in or does reactions. So we will be watching for that throughout the meeting.
Thank you, Paul. All right. Looks like Hannah Schroeder just joined. Hannah, if you can turn on your camera and come off mute, just introduce yourself. Just really quickly, what your relationship is to YDO, what your familiarity is with our grants.
Hello, everyone. My name is Hannah Schroeder. I work for the Klamath Tribes in the Education and Employment Department as the Youth Engagement Specialist. I was asked to be here today by my supervisor, as I believe we work with the grant program. You guys provide like a lot of support for our events we put on and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Excellent. We're really glad you're here. And then if you want to just drop your information in the chat as well, folks will be able to see that, because I caught Klamath Tribes and would love to know the rest of the work that you do. All right, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So this is a recap of what we talked about at our September 27th meeting, which was the last time we chatted. And we talked about two different major elements, and that was regional awards and then also an appeals process. So the regional awards will continue in the same manner as the current biennium, and that is that there's a regional distribution of awards to create regionally specific comparisons of applications and to ensure that there is a distribution across the state of our awards. So we utilize the regional solutions map that has 11 different regions. And if you would like more details about this, we will have, there's a published folder with all of these agendas and the slide decks, as well as a YouTube channel where we post all of the videos of these work group sessions. And in those, like in that slide deck, you'll be able to click through and actually see the regional solutions map, or you can Google it. The method that we have used and will continue to use is that we award the top regional application prior to the rest of the rankings. And there is a minimum of one possible grant to each region for each of the RFAs. And also there's a limit of only one regional award per applicant. And so that means that if an applicant in a specific county, or excuse me, a specific region has the highest in all three of our grants, the community investment, which is abbreviated as CI, Re-Engagement Opportunity Grant, which we call ROG or ROG, and then JWR is the new Job and Workforce Readiness Grant. So if an organization had the highest scores for all three of those RFAs, they would have to choose which one to accept as their regional award, and then the rest of theirs would go into the statewide ranking. Also, we do have we will establish a minimum score prior to the RFA being published, and in order for a regional award to be granted, that application does need to meet that minimum score. Any questions on regional awards? All right. The appeals process that that we are looking at is more than anything else based on the OAR, so the rules around community investment appeals. So an appeals process is required under our community investment grants and is not required for the re-engagement grants, nor was it required for Future Ready, but we applied the community investment appeals process rules to re-engagement and to Future Ready for the 23-25 appeals process. And then also just a note that all of the RFA defined processes, specifically the appeals process, has to be approved by ODE procurement and has to go through legal sufficiency prior to our implementation. So this is what we are looking at now. And so we are looking to better define our grounds for an appeal, and that's that the application has to have been reviewed by evaluators. So the process of an application is that it first goes through minimum qualification, and upon achieving and passing minimum qualifications, then it goes on to be reviewed by evaluators. So if an application is disqualified during minimum qualifications, that's actually handled specifically and only by ODE procurement. And so then another element of the grounds for appeals is that the appeals will only pertain to RFA processes and not to evaluators' scores. So there will be an RFA appeal form that ODE procurement will create, and that form will be shared with everyone with the intent to award notifications. And so if you have been listening or go back and review the older sessions, we talk about our timeline of when RFAs will be released, when the intent to award notifications will go out, and so that will be in mid 2025. But that when the intent to award notifications get sent, the appeals form will also be shared. And that there will be the score and the rank listed by an ID number released with the intent to award notification. Separately from the appeals process, YDO has had and will continue to have an application feedback process, and that is follow-up afterwards. So if someone has received their the intent to award notification, whether they got it or didn't, they can ask us for feedback about their application. And that is something that will happen after the appeals process has closed, that people can really just notify us to say, hey, I'd really like to talk about my application and maybe what parts really stood out to evaluators or what parts were areas where we could strengthen it in the future to have a better application going forward. And so there will continue to be that feedback process, and then the appeals process will happen first. Any questions on that? All right, let's go ahead and go to the next slide, and we're going to talk a little bit about the reporting methodology that we currently have, and that some of this reflects what has happened historically, but particularly we want to be able to highlight what we are doing right now. And then I'll hand it over to Paul and he'll talk about what we're proposing to update. So in the 23-25 biennium, our grantees submit biannual narrative reports. That means twice a year. So in even quarters. So after quarter 2 and quarter 4 and 6 and 8, there's a narrative report that includes program services and activities, progress and promising practices that have been working, the successes that folks have found, and then the challenges. And we really appreciate the information that is shared in those narrative reports. It helps us understand what's happening statewide with challenges. It also helps us understand where we can, as an agency, perhaps make some introductions, help alleviate some pressures, or otherwise help resolve challenges. The expenditure report is something that is submitted, it's usually submitted quarterly. Folks also have the opportunity to submit it monthly. And that's where there are some details around the grant reimbursement. And there's also an inclusion of a budget narrative where folks have the opportunity to explain, like, hey, our expenses were low in personnel because we were able to hire that person we hoped to hire, but it happened a month later than we expected. And so we spent less in personnel. Those sorts of details are really helpful for us to understand when folks are on track with their spending. And then the data reporting currently includes quarterly reports that include details about the programs and also details about individuals who are participating. And then we also have a closeout at the end of each year that functions as an annual report. So once a year, we ask folks to end date, meaning close out the folks who are finishing the year in their programming and then allow for a fresh start on July 1st. So that is a quick summary of what we have been doing and are currently doing. Any questions on that? Just check the chat really quickly. And then I will pass it to you, Paul.
All right. Thank you, Sally. And thanks for doing the recap of it. One of the reasons we wanted to ensure that we provided some recap around what we're currently doing is this next slide is going to talk about, actually, it's already up there. Thank you, Melissa. Talk about some of the proposed updates. And so unless it's specifically stated, the things that Sally covered would remain the same. And so we'll talk a little bit about each one of those areas. And so the narrative reports, you can see one of the biggest shifts that we are proposing is that we want to shift back to the quarterly narrative reports that we've had in previous biennium. And what we found is that in talking with both grantees as well as just understanding grants, how the grant work is doing each quarter, having that quarterly that quarterly budget report really does help us connect with expenditures and program services and help support the grantees in a more specific way and consistent across the biennium. And so that still would include the program services and deliveries, but some of the things that we also want to make sure we understand more is the partnerships and community connections. So that would be something that you would probably see as an increase of focus in the quarterly narrative reports, and then obviously highlighting both challenges and successes, and then the promising practices that folks did. So looking fairly similar to what we've done in the past, but shifting back to that quarterly option that we have used in prior biennium. The expenditure report is where you're going to see some of the more kind of more detailed proposed updates along the way. And so the expenditure reports, really what we want to be able to do is to provide more guidance to grantees around expanded detail and explanation in the budget narrative. And so a lot of folks are using braided funding, or they have shifts in their programs that we really want to be able to capture and connect with the expenditures that people are reporting. And so things such as a justification of higher than expected expenditures per use served. So in one of our grants, the Re-Engagement Opportunity Grant, we currently have grantees justify if it's over $3,000 per use served to date or per that year. And it's not that it's not approved, it's just better allowing grant managers to better understand where those expenses are going. And then we also recognize that there's always shifts. When you apply for a grant, you receive a grant, there's quite a bit of time span, and then things shift throughout the course of that grant cycle. And so justification for continued expenses when fewer youth than anticipated are being served. So during application, we do ask that people say, oh, what's the proposed amount of youth that are going to be served through this direct service program? And you'll do that. And then as the grant process goes throughout, be asking for some further justification if we're maybe lower than what we were anticipated in that. And then the other area that we're looking at shifting from is the past two biennia, we have tried to utilize what we were calling a startup fund model, where that we were trying to front load some funds before reimbursement, right at the initial onset of that grant. And being that these are pretty complicated grants in the sense of getting through the state awarding system, there has been some pretty significant challenges in terms of getting those funds out at a reasonable time. We also know that there's an additional insurance cost that can be applied to startup funds because those are front loaded in terms of that and out of the reimbursement option. And so recognizing that it has not been a terribly successful model, we're looking to explore supplemental reimbursement options because we recognize that our grants can pay for the insurance, the increased insurance requirements to have a state grant, and that can be a big lift for some organizations. So we want to figure out ways to explore supplemental reimbursements so that when your, for example, when your insurance premium is due, that you might not have to wait 3 months to get that reimbursement, that we might be able to expedite that through a process because that's a specific thing related to the services of that grant. So a little bit of shift there. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide, and then we'll do some discussion. We had to break this up because there's a lot of information here. We wanted to make sure you could see it. And so the data reports, they're going to look very similar to what folks have seen in previous biennia. We're going to go into a lot more detail of the individual level participant data at that next agenda item. So I'll kind of just leave it there on that. There are some changes with individual level participant data that we're proposing, but again, it'll look fairly similar to what folks have seen in the past. A new item that we're adding that we do out of practice, and I would say I think grant managers check in regularly with grantees, but adding really an annual program review and evaluation. And it's really intended to be a point in time to just kind of check in purposely around changes or explanations for delays in programming, participation, and or expenditures. Things happen during a grant cycle, so we want to just ensure that we are doing connections with it and making the best decisions to support the grantee as well as the management of these state funds and these federal dollars that we are required to do. And so, for example, currently in practice, we check in with all of our grantees that might be underspending or have underspent their expenditures. And so we have conversations around what makes sense. Does it make sense to return some funds back that we can redistribute? Is there need to be an adjustment in the budget modification on that? We also recognize that new programming sometimes takes a bit to get off the ground. And so having that check-in point at that mid-biennium, we want to really discuss what makes sense within it. And one of the things that we as an agency want to ensure is that services are being provided directly to youth and not just startup funds being used to get the materials in place. And so we want to do that check-in. I could also, so that'll do a review of the project plan with the grant manager. That's that initial proposal. And then also review expenditures and update the budget as needed on that mid-biennium work. So I think I covered the updates for it. I'm looking at my notes here on the slides as well. This next slide is just opening it up for questions or thoughts. And I know Melissa will probably put some of that stuff in the chat as well. So just want to open the floor up for thoughts around quarterly narrative reporting, that quarterly expenditure reports and updates, as well as our data reporting, which I know is pretty limited, and then that new edition of annual program review and evaluation. We have a quiet group today. Any thoughts or questions? All right. Well, I don't think we need to sit here. Oh,
sorry.
Yeah,
I
there
was
you go.
trying to get
Please.
to the button to unmute.
Totally fine.
So since this is being recorded, where do we find the recordings to listen to them later?
That's a great question. So on our website, there is a YouTube channel that all of these are listed onto it. And I'm not exactly sure which side. So Abe, I don't know if you were on here, if you don't mind giving a little direction on the website. Sorry to put you
Yeah,
on the
it's on
spot.
our website, and I believe you can access a YouTube channel. There's a link at the bottom, and actually, there's also something I think Melissa, you just put it in the chat as
She just
well.
dropped it. Yeah, thank you.
So yeah, if you go to our website, it's at the very bottom of the first page you land on. You'll see there's a link at the bottom to the page.
Okay.
It actually says it's under the links subheading. You'll see subscribe to our YDO video channel. You can click on that to the YouTube channel as well.
Okay, thank you. And then I might have missed this part, but I'm not sure. Once the application process opens and the application is available to apply, like to build the civic application, during that window that it's open, is there a point of contact, like while you're filling out your application, if you need to reach out to someone about a question or just help with the process in general?
Yeah, that's a great question. So all of the RFAs will have what's called a single point of contact, or SOP, in terms of SPC. There we go. Got my acronyms mixed up. There's too many floating around in there. But yeah, so every RFA that we release has that clearly identified on the first page. And once anything is open in terms of the competitive grant process, that would be your direct contact. So there is a noticeable shift for those of you that haven't applied in these processes before. There's a very noticeable shift on what we can do as agency staff. We don't get to have these conversations once that is open to keep it fair across the state and for anybody applying. And so it goes, all contact goes through that. Also to note that Melissa has put several other Melissa and Sally have put several other links that can help you get to, Jinx, in terms of accessing those published work group documents for this as well.
Okay, thank
Awesome.
you.
Great question. Thank you.
Could you guys see me just now?
Yes, we can see you.
I can't see myself still. Okay, that's fine. I just want to make sure I'm turning the camera
No
on.
worries. You
All
are
right,
you are perfect.
Well, and the
Thank
other,
you.
the other
sorry.
thing to add to what Paul just said, Talitha, and I'm just making some guesses about your questions. These meetings that we have been holding and that we've now dropped the links so that you can find all of the past sessions are really around our discussion about what the RFA framework will look like for 2025-27. Once everything is approved by our Youth Development Council at their December meeting, then we will get into the nitty-gritty. We will write the actual RFAs, and we will have a series of information sessions in like January, February, probably prior to the RFAs opening. And that is specifically so folks can best understand the scope of each grant and that they can then spend their energy applying for the grant that is a good fit for their organization. Once the RFAs open, then we get to that point where there's a single point of contact within procurement and we're more limited in questions that we can answer, but there will be a lot of opportunity before the RFAs open, but once they are like firmed up, where you'll be able to ask questions and be able to know like, what are you actually looking for? What will evaluators be ranking on? You'll be able to see all of those details and ask more questions.
Awesome.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I know Abe will tell me that I should have said this if I don't. Please make sure underneath that YouTube link and that registration is also to access our email list of information. And so everything that we release publicly goes through that. And if you sign up for the Youth Development Council materials, that'll be where you'll get the most up-to-date information in terms of that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Awesome. There you go. Abe, did I say it right?
Yes, you can sign up for our email list also on our page.
All right, cool. Any other questions around the youth grants reporting methodology? Again, just some kind of minor updates I think that we're proposing along that work. It'll look pretty similar to what we've done in the past on it. Cord, I see you coming on. Did you have something you wanted to add?
I just saw that I think Robin may have unmuted, so let me pause and see if she wanted to jump in.
No, sorry, I was just switching to my car. Thank you, though.
Okay, thanks. Well, I was just going to say, I'm looking and I don't think we have anyone on who has a current grant, unless I'm mistaken. And that, I think that would be helpful maybe for folks who do have a grant right now, what these changes might mean to them, but we don't have anyone that we can ask that I know of, unless I'm missing someone here. But
Impact Northwest is a current grantee.
Okay, great. Yeah, so maybe the question might be, is it Claudia? Based on your experience of the grant right now, and you kind of heard some of these things we're talking about, has anything struck you as a change that you want to know more about, or that looks like a challenge, or anything like that?
No, so I was actually excited about some of the updates because something I really want to do in our reports is talk more about what we're doing and how our new practices have been improving the program. We've seen an increase of students in the past year or so, because I came into this program last July. So I've only been in it for like a year and like maybe 3 months. But especially adding the highlights and challenges, that would be really great. And then promising practices. We already kind of touch on it, but we tried to keep it limited to not go overboard with our reports. But I think it would just show you all a better understanding and overview of what we're doing and how we're doing it. So I don't have any like, oh no, this is too much reaction. It's like, I think it's a really good addition. With the data, same thing. I'm assuming the individual level participant data is just focusing more on individual students rather than like an overall picture, which I also think it's really helpful to provide to you all to see like how this is helping our youth.
Awesome. I appreciate you sharing that, and Cord for checking into that question. And I would say that's pretty collectively from, and I don't want to speak for the grant managers, but I think that's what we've been hearing is that that more consistent touch point, and less that you're able give us a better picture of what's going on. Not that we're not seeing what's going on, but it's just more consistent approach that I think is really positive. So thank you, appreciate that. All right, I think Sally, I turn it back to you. Yeah.
Yeah, let's go to slide 11.
All right.
So again, the idea of the slide is just to capture what is currently happening, so that it's easier to see what the changes look like. So right now, what we do for individual level participant data collection is a little bit different in our three grants. So the community investment grants have individual level participant data that gets collected in an Excel reporting tool, an Excel spreadsheet. And that reporting includes date of birth, race, ethnicity, gender, the date that somebody began the program and then ended the program. And that's really helpful when we are looking at cohorts. So if a program is intentionally 12 weeks long, that we're able to see like, oh, this is the window when those youth were involved. Or if someone is running programming that maybe has youth continuously involved for much longer periods of time, that we're able to capture the information about the dates that they're in the program. We also collect educational and employment status that allows us to see educational progress. So as somebody is moving from grade to grade, and then employment status is particularly useful in the workforce grants. So has somebody gone from maybe part-time employment to full-time employment, or it can also be useful for us to know if somebody is going from full-time employment to part-time employment while they're completing some training or other activities that would benefit that youth's development. Re-engagement grants have some very specific participant data requirements that are legislatively mandated. That data includes participant name and also some other re-engagement specific data. And so that data gets collected on a secure Smartsheet reporting tool. So Excel is not secure and Smartsheet is, so we have some differences there. And then in the Future Ready grants, there is an entire portal that got built by HEC, the Higher Education Coordinating Commission. And so there is a lot of data that gets collected about each individual participant, and that data all gets submitted on Excel spreadsheets through this secure data portal. And so the data includes the same CI data points, also name of each participant, and then also some Future Ready specific data that's related to the programmatic activities that each grantee is doing through the Future Ready grant. Any questions on what we're currently doing? And also for those who are new to this part of the conversation, Future Ready is federally funded, and those funds end in June 2025. And so that also means the requirements for that grant will end. And so when I turn this over to Paul and he goes into the next bit, the reason there isn't conversation about Future Ready grants is because those grants are ending. So any questions, or I'll pass it to Paul.
Thanks, Sally. I think it's an important note because as we look through these comparisons of what we're doing now and what we're doing next biennium, definitely there's some shifts in names on that. The other thing that I would note for those folks that haven't applied recently or aren't current grantees is our website also includes all of our previous published RFA materials. And so while once we release that, we'll release the new ones when that comes in late winter, early spring of 2025. But you can go back and look at and see all this information, both within each type of grant that we offer, but then also in our technical assistance pages of each of those grant categories. So this next slide is one of the things that I think you'll start seeing some shifts that we've had lots of conversation as an agency as we have grown over the course of the past 4 years. Obviously, we added student success dollars in the re-engagement work back in 2019. Future Ready was, I'm going to get the date wrong, I think it was 2022, I think, or 21, not sure where that is. So we've added these new grant things, and so we've really been trying to keep up with the pace around reporting and data. And you can see that we saw 3 different models that we were currently in progress with that. And so as an agency, we've been talking about what makes sense and for our data collection and our reporting. And so we've started developing what we're calling Youth Development Oregon reporting and data principles, and it's really intended to guide reporting design and practices as we go through it, provide flexibility as we move along. Obviously, Future Ready had some legislative mandates as well as re-engagement of data collection. And so how do we keep consistent and honor the work that grantees are doing in that data submission, but also then adjust to the growing needs and adjustments that the legislation may require. So I'm going to turn it over to Cord here in just a second to talk a little bit more in detail, but really those reporting and data principles are structured around 5 items. So security and privacy of the data that we collect, consistency among grants. So obviously you saw where there's maybe less consistency currently in that. Program friendly, so being that we want to honor the work that programs are doing and not make it a difficult collection, purposeful collection. So knowing what we're going to use that data for. And then lastly, all the quality of our data when we share it out and publish within that. So I want to hit pause and turn it over to Cord to maybe provide a little bit more context to that work as he's leading it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you covered it pretty well, actually. I would say that each of these these are conversations that we have been having in an ongoing way, and they're things we are wrestling with. And I think what is driving us to sort of step back and do this is that we do see an opportunity right now with the Future Ready sunsetting, looking at different some changes to RFAs, seeing that we have a lot of things we've done in inconsistent ways, and not saying that with judgment. We've just done a lot of different stuff at the same time. And how do we sort of step back and look at this, and what are the things that are our kind of guide star for whatever decisions we make? And that's what this is intended to be. So when we're wrestling with, do we move in this direction or that, these are the questions that we ask. I think the thing that I would say about particularly, I think program friendly, I wish I could find a more sophisticated sounding way of saying it. But I think one of the things that, all these are important, but this is one that I think we think about a lot. I think purposeful collection is also tied to it. And it is that we ask a lot in reporting to an extent. It's not like there's 100 data elements in all of the grants. There are, I think maybe in Future Ready, there's possibly 1,000. But when we ask for things, we should ask for things that we need and we will use. When we collect things, we should do it in a way that is as accessible as possible. We know that many organizations don't have a data person or a data team or a database that you collect everything in. And so our tools might be, for some organizations, the most comprehensive data collection they may be doing in their work. And for others, they've got really sophisticated stuff and they have to make it work with what we're doing. So we're trying to meet a lot of different levels of capacity and need, and also do it in a way that I think honors the work, and do that by asking for things that we have an intention to do something with. The last thing I'll add is that we have this blessing and curse that for some of our grants, not so much with re-engagement, but with community investments, for example, we don't have in our legislation, like, you need to collect XYZ and you need to create this report and you need to do these things for the legislature, like many other state agencies do. And so it kind of leaves us with the necessity to figure out, what the story is that we want to tell about the work, and what story the community wants to tell, and how we help programs to do that. So I think this is really an iterative thing where we are constantly trying to figure out how to do a better job of sharing the work that everyone is doing. And this, whatever we do in terms of how reporting and our data collection evolve, should ultimately serve the purpose of supporting this work, of making policymakers, lawmakers aware of it, show the impact, show the hard work that folks are doing on the ground. So that's just all stuff that we are considering as we are working through the changes that we're talking about today.
Awesome, Cord. Thank you. I think that was really well said of I would say years of conversation that we're trying to boil down into 5 bullet points, which is pretty tough to do. So thanks for leading that work on it. All right. So if we want to go to the next slide, and we'll kind of cover some of the updates that we're talking about with the individual level participant data. And so our goal moving into this next biennium is that we do what we can to create a common reporting platform outside of that work. So you saw that we're currently using 3 platforms across 3 of our grants. What can we do to align that so that it's the same platform? Because the reality is we have a multitude of grantees that reported in 2, if not all 3 of those different platforms. And so simplifying that with that program friendly. Common report metrics and method is really diving into how we're collecting information. So if we're collecting information in terms of name, that we want to make sure that the name is listed as first and then last, right? Consistently across it. So we're not adding confusion in those data collections, just as an example within that work. And then also calling out common elements in the individual participant data so that folks know what to expect. And in previous work groups, we've talked about what those models look in terms of the funding structures. That to be top funded, you have to be able to collect individual participant level data. So we want to be very explicit on what that is and what to expect as you go into that application. And so naming those bullet points, so calling out a participant name must be included in the individual participant data, date of birth, gender, race, ethnicity, the program start and end date, educational status, and then employment status. And by those statuses, it's going to be those things of what grade are you in, or have you completed, right? In terms of that work, same thing with employment. Are you part-time? Are you not employed? Or is that youth full-time employed or part-time employed or not employed at all in regards to that? So it'll be a consistent piece. And we recognize that some of those data points may not necessarily fit all of your grants, but it will be an expectation that you would report into it. So for example, if you're doing a 3rd grade reading program or support at an elementary school, we recognize those youth are probably not employed, but we would be just a simple indicator in terms of noting that they were not employed to keep our consistent data across that. And then as many of you have seen, if you have our re-engagement grants or our current future ready grants, is there is some grant specific data that is needed because of the type of grant and or through legislation and primarily through that legislative requirement in some of those grants. So we have to have flexibility in adding additional pieces, but our commitment would be that these are the common elements and how we collect it outside of being directed legislatively to do something different along those lines. And so while those are the proposed updates, this next slide is some things that we're also currently under consideration that we want to be transparent about that these are things we're thinking about across all grants, but we don't necessarily know the exact phase. Oh, Zan, I see your comment. Thank you. Appreciate that. And Zan in the chat said, this is exciting. It should really help us learn more about common elements. So I appreciate that comment. The data that we're currently under consideration is around focus on underserved and system impacted populations. So how would we collect that is one of those unknown pieces, and we're researching with our data folks on that Court's helping lead. But we want to understand the populations that we are serving and the most impacted along that side. And then also around the aggregate or organizational data of focused populations. And just kind of a note of what we're talking about with those focus populations could be foster care, juvenile justice impacted, clear down to LGBTQIA+ or tribal affiliation and or membership. And those are going to be very specific data sets that we have to wrestle with in terms of how we collect that and to meet that security and privacy outline that Cord talked about earlier, as well as just recognizing that those can have pretty big impact in terms of us understanding that overall picture. So I'm going to hit pause there to check in with Sally and Cord to see if I covered those pieces correctly.
Sounded good to me.
Perfect.
Sounded good, Paul. I have a question though, because we've spent some time with this slide deck, and I actually don't think that we've addressed something that we touched on, I believe maybe the last or second to last meeting, which is the individual level data collection and grant award level. So these are all the requirements if you are doing individual level participant data collection. But if I recall correctly, in some cases, in certain RFAs, there might be a possibility of pursuing a grant where individual level participant data isn't collectible, but there is a different threshold then of fund availability. So there is a situation where an organization says we cannot do this, but then that constrains how much funding is available, and there are still data collection requirements, but it would differ from this. Is that? I just realized I don't think we put that in here, but I realized that we should tie those things back together.
No, you're absolutely right on. I'm kind of shaking my head thinking we should have talked about that in the 4 prep meetings we've done of this, but that's okay. Um, but yes, so for the highest award amounts and for our grants that are doing direct service, these would be the expectations around the individual level participant data. And as if you go back and look at some of the previous proposals, we have basically 3 funding levels. The 300,000 is for current grantees that can do individual participant level data collection, as well as meet the other grant requirements within that. A grantee that might be new to YDO but can meet those same requirements of individual participant data, as well as the grant scope can request up to 200,000. And so for biennium, I should say all these grants are for biennium because those are important notes to do. And then the lowest level essentially that we have offered would be up to $150,000. And that's where our preference is that we collect individual participant level data through those, but is not as required. And so we would look, a grant manager would look specifically with that application of what makes sense. So you might be doing a system-wide work to implement a strategy across the school district that individual level participant data would be really hard to collect on that impact. And so a grant manager would work with you to mold what makes sense in terms of it. But if you just are a grantee that is serving an after school program of a population of 20 to 30 youth and you're still in that lower funding stream, we would want to look and start at the individual participant level data and see what you can collect and then adjust from there. So that's a great point, and I'm still shaking my head of like we probably should have thought of that in this. So thank you, Cord, for bringing that up.
No problem. I just thought of it too, so it's okay.
Okay, fair enough. Well, you're in this meeting, so yeah, I figured you would have said it in those meetings for sure.
Got a lot. There's a lot in this slide deck. There is a lot in here, so it's okay.
There is. All right, great clarifying question, Brian. I saw you come off. Would you anything you wanted to add in terms of this conversation?
Not really. I mean, just appreciate the point. I think we can either in a future work group meeting or as we come together for, once we're doing intro sessions, I think we can, to any extent that is ultimately necessary as we go to our December quarterly meeting, we can put what you articulated, Paul, we can figure out how to put that together in a bullet point or 2 or 3 so that there's some clarity.
No, that's thanks, Brad.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. So, and I want to put a note into that because we can come back to a little bit about what things look like, but I also want to make sure that people are able to ask questions on the individual level participant updates that we're proposing. So, Melissa, if you can bump it to the next slide, we just kind of outlined the big bullet points there, but I know Melissa will also put it in the chat in case folks have. And again, Zan, I appreciate your comment in chat in the chat. Like I think that's what we're kind of hoping for as we continue to refine this work. I don't know if you wanted to say anything additional about it. I see a thumbs up, so that's awesome. That's a good indicator. All right. Again, Robin, want to hit pause to make sure that you have space. I know that you're on the phone.
I'm good right now. Thank you.
Absolutely. Abe, I saw you come on screen. Anything to add?
Nope.
Sounds good. All right. Well, this has been really, I think, informative. I appreciate the comments and the support in terms of making some of these shifts. This is a really important piece of what we want this work group to be. We don't want anything to be of a surprise, and we want to engage as much as we can in terms of these concepts within that. So, Melissa, maybe if you want to pull back up and why people maybe still are thinking questions, we'll come back to if have questions, but we can kind of close out today. So if you want to come back onto slide 16, just with the next work group. All right, so we are at a bit of a transition in our RFA process. We've been talking about this as a grants team as well. This is one of those times where we start getting ready to take the RFA process to the council for approval in December. And so we currently only have one additional work group meeting set for Wednesday, November 20th. And Melissa, and we'll be sending out that same information with the agenda and the Zoom links and all of that, be very similar format to that. But kind of what happens at this point is that we're going to continue to, we'll focus on kind of large changes, as well as what's going to go to the council in December for their approval of the RFA process. That December council meeting, I believe, is on, I'm going to move my calendar here just a sec to make sure. I think it's December 12th. And if you're on that listserv, those information will come out as well. So on December 12th, you will see the overall proposal going to council for approval of the RFA process in general. And once the council approves our process, we will move into what we typically call community conversations. That format is still being looked out in kind of that January, February range. Sally talked a little bit about that, and it'll include some information on our strategic plan, as well as just what that overall look of the youth grants is going to look like going into the RFA process. We would then move into the RFA releases, which we've talked about will be sequential over the course of late winter, early spring, starting with the re-engagement opportunity grant as proposed currently, and then we move into the information sessions. So I say all of that, not that you need to remember any of it, but it connects us back to that email list that we really want you to make sure that you're signed up for it, so you keep up to date on all these opportunities to engage with it and learn as much as you can before we get into that competitive process moving forward. I will say, in terms of the work groups, I personally think that has been incredibly valuable information taking back to our team. I am excited to move to this stage where we will not be as online in the work groups doing the actual writing the RFA, but I think we're taking valuable information as we design those and get them ready to print and publish late winter. So I see some head nods. So obviously, I think Clert and Sally agree with me on those statements. But I want to just pause if other people have questions or want to add anything to it. All right. Well, judging that is so quiet, maybe it's because it's a Friday afternoon in October. I don't know. But I do want to just appreciate everybody's time in this work. I hope you can join us at the next work group meeting, November 20th, in terms of that work. And always feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Can't access any of this information online. We want to make it as accessible as we can for everybody that is interested in this work. Brian, any last words before we call it?
Just appreciate the your time. Yeah, Friday afternoon on in October, maybe just one of those days. But also, I think you covered everything. Everybody covered everything really well, and so we'll give you a little extra time back in your Friday. So, thanks.
Thank you.